Right. This main last piece, there's a small ending bit after, will require deep thinking and pondering caps. No masks allowed. The scripted narrative of the 2014 world has become more obvious than previous attempts to roll back time within the 4-year loop. The alt media is littered with it. The same script from 6 years ago. Channelers returning. Even Pete Santilli has been rolled back out. And I mentioned it recently, they were all returning, and mentioned Cindy Courier. And then a former CV member pops up and asks if she was valid. That person was very familiar with Cindy in the past because we outed her in Cosmic Voice, and yet didn't appear to remember who she was. Now, these events appear random and yet are so often repeated, and so it becomes a program of events, scripts, and live events to unfold. On a psychological level, my assessment now is we are clearly now dealing with a mass psychosis event and element. People appear to have less memory than even a goldfish now, and I've lost count the number of times in the past month that people have sent me articles, asked questions on subjects or topics that have been put out in recent shows, never mind shows from a few months ago. But those memory wipes have inserted them back into the saviour and money programs of the alt media that was so prevalent from 2008 and 2014. Many got exposed by myself and Randy Morgans at the time, and why I was initially reluctant of joining up with the Trust in 2016, as I was pondering whether it was a trap to lure me into another money-based program. But when I was asked to join, I gave conditions for joining and asked could they facilitate my reasons for joining, and they said yes and gave details of certain things, and so I agreed to join. At no stage did I join the Trust for money, either for the self or the collective. It was not a priority for me, and was also a potential hook to rope me in. And having warned of the hooks in the shows, I was not going to fall for that potential trick at the time. You see, in their world, everyone has a price. I don't. It's that simple. I remember being grilled by the security team of the Trust early 2019 as they questioned my motives for being here, and I told them why. To help Kim. And they refused to accept it, shifted the questions around several times, and my answer was always the same. I came here to help Kim. Now, the 5 hooks are drugs, alcohol, sex, money, and religion. None of them applied to me, and the hidden hook of unbalanced ego didn't or doesn't either. Despite claims by some people who actually have that problem themselves, which is a common theme now projecting the self into and onto others. As time speeds up and makes less sense now, events, characters will pop in and out of our reality now at an increasing pace, all designed to get you to question yourself and your own sanity. But remember, these people are actors in a movie scene we are no longer a part of. Some of you who listen to this show have turned off and unplugged your movie playing on your VCR, which could stand for virtual clown reality. And for those of you who travel, that may well make more sense to you personally. The distraction crew of the movie set is in full flow now, pulling you back into their world. That makes less and less sense by the day. You must resist inserting yourselves back into that fake and false reality, replete with endless streams of TV channels espousing the senility of what they call entertainment. I call it entrainment. And if you remove the letters ET from entertainment, you are left with entrainment. And perhaps that makes more sense of its origin. The popular launch of 24/7 TV mind control was done by MTV. Perhaps there's a new MTV. Time will tell. All designed to distract people from reality. An endless stream of drivel, none more so than the oxymoron named show that became the most popular on that channel, called reality TV. If only it was. But Cassandra told us previously, for 100 years we have fed you your entertainment and you have devoured our offering, supporting the lies you're told whilst ignoring the nuggets or people of truth. The two worlds we spoke of back in 2015 is now in clear view. We also spoke of 2020, the time people would see. And those both now are prominent in our world. Hence the AI-based loop program of trying to change what is known as time. But ultimately, time is an illusion of their world. As we go towards the anomaly or the event horizon, time changes due to dilation. What is a few seconds here can be many years elsewhere. Essentially, we are, or hopefully were, governed by time, which means to bind when separated. Tie me. Time is and was the God in here. A control mechanism and also a fear-inducing concept. Why else would they call it Father Time? And the depictions of Father Time is all very Jesus or God-like. A Jesus in an older form. A man repeat with a long beard, which is the same depiction of the Anunnaki, is it not? Perhaps they are one and the same. Remember, we spoke of why the gods came here in the From Russia with Love series. They came to buy more time with the elixir of life from the milk ocean that existed where the Himalayan mountains are now situated. The elites still do it, of attempting to cheat time and old age by consuming adrenochrome. And it all boils down to gaining from time. So time becomes the god here, and wielded its fear, power and control on us all. The religious orders all call God the Father. So if God is the Father, who is Father Time? Chronos. Who or what is Chronos? In recent centuries, he's usually depicted as an elderly bearded man, sometimes with wings, dressed in a robe and carrying a scythe and an hourglass or other time-keeping device, which represents time's constant one-way movement and more generally and abstractly entropy. Usually with wings. Oh my. The New Age and religious elements will all scream, he is one of the angels. Those who have researched properly will realise it is the fake gods again. The Anunnaki had wings. Just saying. Your Michaels, Azazel, Raphael, Gabriel, Ariel, Samael, Seraphim, Elohim, and all others of that ilk all came out of the Talmud book, long before Christianity adopted the religion of the Hebrews. The Hebrews on earth were the black Africans originally. The Hebrews now are the disciples of the Hebrew Anunnaki, playing the same war and same events of time out like a loop. If these angels we heard about were so great, and we are told an angel came to the entity known as Jesus before his alleged arrest, why didn't they save the alleged Son of God? Why wouldn't God save his only Son? Does that really make any sense? And here is what does make sense of that analogy, because that is what it is, a misinterpretation of the narrative that is riddled with analogies in the so-called holy books. The real reason is because those gods in the past and also the bloodline families here on earth all sacrificed their firstborn is why. The other entities worshipped here by the Hebrews, or the modern day term Jewish, is Solomon and Herod did exactly the same thing. Are you seeing a pattern now? The story of Jesus is symbolic of their earthly, not godly-based practices. A group of other beings we call ETs now, presenting themselves as God or gods. The Anunnaki beings are depicted in hieroglyphs with wings. The royal white Draco appear in wings, of which Anu was one of them. Now, some people will not believe that last statement, but their psychosis effect prevents them from seeing that for themselves. They will look at the hieroglyphs and see a man, and ignore the wings aspect because that is outside of their own program of understanding. But if you develop your own program of understanding and not accept theirs, you will come to the conclusion that A, hieroglyphs are disclosure of ET life, and B, we see with our own eyes and interpret it ourselves, and C, we come to our own conclusions. A man with wings is not native to this planet. That means it's from somewhere else. That is ET Disclosure 101. It cannot get any simpler. But people with psychosis cannot do that. And this world is riddled with people living within time and psychosis. Now, they mentioned he carries the hourglass, which we in the UK call the egg timer. How apt is that? That our show revealed the hourglass concepts in describing how life loops, time and events unfolded here. For those of you in Arizona, you got that personally. And it is said that the hourglass represents time and its constant one-way movement, which is describing linear. Except time is an illusion and cannot be linear, as all events are past, present and future. If the hourglass represents only a constant one-way movement of time, what happens when you tip that hourglass upside down? Does time go backwards? I know, common sense again. But that ends that illusion of a constant one-way movement of time. The representation of the tipped upside down hourglass is a description of an earth-based event of pole flips. North becomes south and east becomes west. China and Russia become the North America region. Australia and New Zealand become top of the world. But what is up and what is down? Essentially, there is no up or down. It depends on your orientation of standing on objects. Australia and New Zealand are described as down under. Has anyone asked, what are they down under from? Are they beneath the surface of something? Is Australia and New Zealand in a giant cave? Why describe it as down, which means something below, and under, which also means below something? And the question is, what are they beneath? As above, so below springs to mind. But what is above and what is below is the great question. Surely above and below have no real concept, as it is indicative of where and how you stand and your perspective from that particular vantage point. I can hear you all now. Oh, Thomas is getting too technical. But if you approach Earth from a spacecraft from the North Pole, Australia would appear as the top of the world, not down under. So your perception then becomes different from the differing vantage points of observation, does it not? The sky is up above us, but the sky is also below us. We just can't see it as it is below the horizon. Look at the words below the horizon. The original version of horizon was to circle or bind. So the sky is not up or down, but all around us. Just like the universes, yes, plural. Just like the dimensions, just like the planes of reality. They are neither up or down, but around us. Time's constant one-way movement, and more generally and abstractly entropy, the description said. So what is entropy? Well, it is a scientific concept as well as a measurable physical property that is most commonly associated with a state of randomness or disorder. So entropy is a state of randomness or disorder. So how can that be associated with fixed and recorded time? The answer is it can't. Entropy predicts that certain processes are irreversible or impossible, aside from the requirement of not violating the conservation of energy. The latter being expressed in the first law of thermodynamics. Entropy, they say, is central to the second law of thermodynamics, which states that the entropy of isolated systems left to spontaneous evolution cannot decrease with time. Isolated systems left to spontaneous evolution cannot decrease with time, as they always arrive at the state of thermodynamic equilibrium where the entropy is highest. So let's look at this line again. Entropy of isolated systems left to spontaneous evolution cannot decrease with time. So what they state is the randomness or disorder of evolution cannot decrease with time in an isolated system. And yet we are told this evolution was not done out of randomness or disorder, but was created by a God over time, which is contrary to scientific conclusions, more so in an isolated system. But what if Earth was in an isolated system? And that system is governed by time. I've thrown out random hints in recent shows to see if some of you picked up on it. 3 in particular. Inside your matrix, God is time. God is an AI. and you interact with Source outside of time, which is outside of an isolated system. Perhaps now those three statements makes much more sense. If not, ponder on it some more. They say, as an image, Father Time's origins are curious. Yes, it's only curious because they leave key factors out of the narrative is why. But it also depends on which meaning of origins the writer was portraying. Origins now is where you come from, but the original version of origin was ancestors or race. Oops. So origin, like nations, both meant race. The ancient Greeks themselves began to associate Chronos, their word for time, with the agricultural god Kronos, who had the attribute of a harvester's sickle, just like the Grim Reaper, who calls time on you. Now, a sickle is a curved or crescent-shaped blade, symbolizing the moon. All celebrate the harvest moon now, as the moon calls time on the light of day. You may want to replay that line more than once. But how curious can that be that the father of time is also a harvester? Are you now connecting the dots? They are the harvesters of life force and energy. Currency and time are replacements for life force energy. What is the saying? Time is money. And money is compensation for your labour. By doing labour, you are using your life force energy. The Israeli Hebrew word for time is eth. Eth is also on the stock market called Ethereum, which is an open-sourced blockchain cryptocurrency. The currency of the dead, hence crypto, steals your time, which is money, which is life force energy. Coincidence? Now, some will say, but he's referring to agricultural crops. Kronos, the agricultural god. Which means greens and vegetables and fruits. And yes, that will be correct to your perception. But what if an off-world thinks of us as agricultural? And is there evidence to support it? Well, here is a description of agriculture. Agriculture is the science and art of cultivating plants and livestock. Your interpretation of livestock, one word, assumes it is to do with animals. But what if we are the livestock? And is there evidence of this? Yes, in the Hebrew Talmud again. They describe us, the Goyim, as animals, beast, reference us as pigs. and all those are our own livestock terms. One of the parents, Cassandra, who ran this planet for so long, also echoed the Hebrew Talmud. Same program, same beings is why. And she said, children is what you are. You are the children of animals. Our birth certificates are a live stock traded upon within the markets, which are called stocks. We are the living or the live stock. Live stock can be said as one word or two, but whether two or one word, the essence of it and the notion behind it is one and the same. They told you all in Jupiter Ascending they consume our life force. In their religious ceremonies, they told us to eat the flesh and drink the blood of Christ. That is cannibalism. But it's symbolic, Thomas. Symbolic of what, I would ask? Symbolic of what? It is them and their fun and games again telling you to your face what they do. You just cannot grasp it. As they've told you, the reverse, that man is top of the food chain. But when have they ever told us the truth? Cani, which means to consume, Baal, the god. So cannibalism is to consume the flesh of man as a sacrifice to the entity known as Baal, which is a title, not a name. Rothschilds, Moses, Baal, Ra were all titles and not individual beings. Is there evidence today of modern cannibalism outside of the church ceremonies? Yes, we have found that they put aborted baby fetus cells in certain foods, in particular fast foods. Curious term now, fast food. People relate the word fast with speed, and yet don't the Hebrewic and Muslim people fast from food? Hebrew and Muslim is one and the same religion, by the way. Islam means Isis hidden. Israel means Isis and Ra are gods. So the term fast food means you are fasting from real food, perhaps. Oops. They also put the baby fetuses in medicine, drugs, vaccines and cosmetics which people consume. Time for the MeWe vomit gif, I think. And that is what we know to this point. But perhaps the description of Baal reveals more. Biblical from late Latin Baal, Greek Baal, Hebrew Baal, literally means owner, master, lord, and a title applied to any deity including Jehovah. Well, I never. But later a name of a particular Semitic solar deity worshipped by the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians. Phoenicians are followers of the phoenix, which is the Jewish Bennu bird of death. Out of our ashes they will rise is what they are telling us. But perhaps we have a more modern day version of Phoenicia called Phony-CIA. Maybe they're the same people. And from Baal, he took possession of. Also, he married, which is Beulah. Related to or derived from the Akkadian god name Belu, which is the source of the Hebrew Bel and the name of Marduk. Oops. For whom the bell tolls. I hear it and I'm activated. TikTok. He married, and the marriage ceremony for all females means you are wed not to your husband, but bound and wed to Baal. Beulah, look it up. The Hebrews worshipped Baal, Bel and Marduk and still do to this day. And perhaps the trustee could explain that more on her channel, given she worked directly with him every 2,000 years for the past 15,000 years. Identical with the first element in Beelzebub and the second in Hannibal, the grace of Baal, Hasdrubal, help of Baal, and the name has been used figuratively in English for any false god. That last line being the truth. They are all false gods. Baal, Marduk, Jehovah, Anu, Enki, Enlil, Moses, Noah, Melchizedek, Khan, Cohen, Shem, Ham, and their 13 tribes of death and destruction. We are told by the tribal peoples that the gods brought us the technology called agriculture. Why? To fatten us up. Think different. The tribal peoples can be excused for ignorance back then, but not so much now, as many of them were in league with these off-world harvesters, and still are to this day. The 4 corner states and tribal regions, called reservations. Does anyone ask why they're called reservations? A reservation is something you book for a stay, is it not? And the same tribal people who will not let people onto certain portions of their land, they are the booking agents for the off-world entities is why. The Ute lands are riddled with off-world, and the public by and large cannot visit certain regions on their land, a land they share with other entities. Why? Because they are all descendants of what we call the Indians. Not American Indians. They came from India via Africa and Egypt, and they were the disciples of Ham, Shem, Moses, Noah, and other biblical names, all of which are off-world entities who came here to use and abuse the native populace. Not all Native Americans are Indians. I want to make that clear. But many of them are claiming they are the 13th tribe or part of the 13 tribes, particularly the Cherokee, but also others. But those Indians merged with the local populace, bred with them, killed them in their hundreds of thousands, long before the latest boogeyman of these entities called the white man arrived. Long before. The Hopi speak in revering terms of the Great White Brotherhood returning. That is the Ers, Rus, and Aryan people. The illusion is America was peaceful and all the tribes coalesced in peace together, is another gigantic lie told to modern-day man. Like most of the rest of his story, it was all a fabrication and an illusion. Go and check out Dane Calloway, a black man who will tell you the truth about black history. Your 13 tribes of Israel are or were all the disciples of these satanic off-world harvesters of humans. I call them the Hebrew Anunnaki. These Hebrews have done this in every country on this planet. They snuck in, took over their lands and crops, and eventually killed many of the local populace, either with violence or starving them out by taking over and denying access to or destroying their crops. For modern-day evidence of that, see Palestine. But also our story last week in India. The Israeli envoy is running the farmlands of India and cutting the farmers out. The same happened in the last 100 years in America, since the Hebrew takeover of the Federal Reserve and this country's whole financial system. Farmers were forced off of their land, and the core pirates like Walmart bought their produce at less than cost rates, and the farmers were forced to sell or abandon their lands. There is another word for time called Kaal, K-A-A-L, and it represents time and death in Sanskrit. The letter K again, and also related to India, Hindu, Jainism, Buddhism, of which we covered in no great light in the From Russia with Love series. And it's transferred into different spellings, which is a common theme also, to Kala, K-A-L-A, which is also the name of a deity, in which sense it's not always distinguishable from Kala, same spelling, which means black. So there are two words for the same spelling of Kala. One means time and death, the other means black. But change one letter again from Kala to Kali, which means dark, which is black, and it is all one and the same thing. The Kali Ma worshipped in India and other places is the Dark Mother. Some call it the Black Madonna, associated with moon cult worship and Lilith. Lilith was the Eve in at least one of the 6 civilizations of man. At least one. Man, or Adam, never stood a chance with 2 serpents in the garden, just there to seduce him onto a wrong path. Now, it's often used as one of the various names or forms of Yama, Y-A-M-A. Yama is known as the deity of death also, and also related to the underworld. Yama, a wrathful god or the enlightened protector of Buddhism that is considered worldly and said to judge the dead and preside over the Narakas, which is hell or purgatory and the cycle of rebirth, which all sounds like the Greek mythology of Hades and the underworld. It is. Same people or beings, different epochs of time, different bodies, but the same entities. And judging the dead and the Egyptian version of the Pleiadian Thoth, with its heart and feather justice system, is exactly the same. Kala is another of the Hindu multi-armed beings. Again, unless people are deformed, humans don't have multi-arms. In case you hadn't noticed. Do people not see something radically wrong with this portrayal, where freaks of nature, and I don't mean that in a derogatory term, are venerated? But if only as many people were as kind to the disabled nowadays, the answer is where and why not? And yet the religious cult element celebrates and venerate all kinds of freaks of nature. They all wait for the God to return. And yet your real God has never appeared in physical form ever. Your God or source does not have a physical body, and it never wrote books either. People only love God or gods when they have failed to remember their own connection to source. Now, Yama only holds transitional places in hell, where he oversaw the deceased before he and the generals of 5 paths were assigned a course of rebirth. So the Yama, named Kala or Karl, holds transitional places in hell, and they are attributed to time and death. Maybe where there is time, there is death. Where there is time, there is hell. Maybe time is both. And these gods are the ones who imposed time on us all. Now, the Romans equated Kronos with Saturn, who also had a sickle and was treated as an old man, often with a crutch. Time, death, and hell linked with Saturn. A sickle shaped like a crescent moon. Perhaps the Saturn-Moon matrix makes more sense now also. The wings and the hourglass were kind of early Renaissance additions, and he eventually became a companion of the Grim Reaper, Father Time. The Grim Reaper, the personification of death, often taking his side. And it was said he may have an attribute, a snake with its tail in its mouth, an ancient Egyptian symbol of eternity. So the Ouroboros is also Egyptian. The eternity symbol is also known as the Mobius loop, another humanitarian and planetary based trap. Now, in the story of the Titans, the greatest benefaction for humanity seems to have been saving them from complete destruction. But in an apparent twist on the myth of the so-called 5 ages of man, we are the 6th, found in Hesiod's works and days, wherein Kronos and later Zeus created and destroyed 5 successive races of humanity. Kronos and Zeus. Now, Prometheus asserts that Zeus had wanted to obliterate the human race altogether, but that he somehow stopped them, or him. Not all Titans were bad, and not all Olympians were either. There was elements in both groups that didn't go along with the rape and harvesting of humanity, and some tried to save man. But his story goes to the victors, and humanity has lost every war until now. This time we went past the latest catastrophic civilization ending event in 2012. And we have an opportunity to chart a better and more peaceful path, and that is down to us all. In the Orphic tradition, the unaging Kronos was engendered by earth and water and produced aether and chaos, and also an egg. Kronos had no parents and just appeared, maybe from the mists of time. And time has certainly produced chaos in the egg, which is the cosmos. But if time was linear, how can Kronos be unaging? But if Kronos and time just appeared from nowhere, perhaps Kronos is and was an AI. AI became time, and time became the god of our system, which means our god here is an artificial intelligence. If you do time, it means to serve a prison sentence. Time is also a limitation program. And time, they say, means a limited space of time, but could also be a limited time of space as well as a limited space time. And when you ponder on that, this piece makes a whole lot of sense. Inception, an act, process, or instance of beginning. But from the beginning of time became our sentence of doing time for the benefit of the dark forces. Step outside of time and it all ends. The bridge awaits, and perhaps the shape of the movement of two planets observable in the skies now is indicative. And the convergence of Saturn and Jupiter, which is Kronos and Zeus this month, signals that event, and the great leap of mankind begins. One small step for man, one giant leap for the right kind of man. Happy pondering on that piece. Multi-layered. You will get it. Final piece tonight. And it's a piece of intel. Heavy hidden war work is now underway, and some positive confirmations were already garnered this week. We had to go back to the hidden war as some parts needed to be regained and re-established for the greater good. I cannot say what is unfolding, but I can say expect disruption and or delays of fake vaccines. We are in the final battle of the light and dark here now. Do not be put off or distracted by the 85%. Do not let them absorb you or your energy, for they are legions of the dark forces, unwittingly or not. They are there for your distraction only, incapable of providing common sense or the backbone required to fight back. We, on the other hand, do. And despite coming so far and a tad weary, battered and worn, we are all still here and fighting. Take encouragement and empowerment from that. They threw everything at us, and still we stand. Further tests will arrive and be a challenge for us. But ride the wave. Don't rise and fall with it. No fear. It is they who are in fear, not us. All their tricks, tools, spellcasting and word magic, and we're all still here. All their rape, pillaging and harvesting, and we're all still here. With the glitch outside of time and motion now back in play, things are about to get real interesting in coming days, weeks, and months. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. A fitting end.